Before you say anything, I tried to buy a truck from Craigslist a few years ago. I wasn't in the best financial shape, but it was a great price. I'd never used Craigslist before, but I knew it was an average place for people to sell their stuff, which meant it was usually cheap, even with the low prices of cars on the site. I still had to ask my father for money because I didn't even have the few $1,000s in my account that I needed in cash for a cheap car. After some scrolling, I messaged this guy who had posted his truck for $4,000, and he responded quickly, answering all of my questions and providing what sounded like honest answers. Basically, he said that while it might not look the best, it will get you where you need to go with reliability. He agreed to meet me at a Burger King, which was about halfway between where we both lived. I arrived first, taking an Uber, and he arrived about 5 minutes later. We talked for a while, and he told me more about the truck, mentioning minor issues he'd had with it in the past, but nothing too serious. After all, I didn't have the money to be picky. Naturally, I asked if I could test drive it, and he replied that he knew of a less busy parking lot where I could do so. Honestly, I was like, whatever, and pulled out my phone to call a quick Uber, but he said it was just across the street and that we could ride together. I had never done something like this before and didn't want to be rude, so I kind of assumed it was a normal thing. Looking back, I should have told him to fuck off, but I was young and he was old, so for some reason I trusted him. As I got inside, he asked me if I had my license on me, which was just another reason I trusted him. He seemed like he was a genuine guy. He started driving, though we went a little further than across the street, probably a few blocks away from the Burger King to this empty parking lot away from the main road, which was the first red flag to come up, even though it should have been the second or third. "All right, let's switch," he said, putting the car in park. As we were passing each other around the car, he threw me the keys saying heads up, but they landed nowhere near me. I mean, I would have had to dive into the concrete to catch them. Awkwardly, I went to pick them up, and just as I bent down, I felt the weight of his foot slam against my side. Before I knew it, he was on top of me, ripping my wallet out of my back pocket and running back towards the truck. I immediately grabbed the keys from the ground, thinking he must have forgotten them. In the heat of the moment, I could force a trade. Unfortunately, though, the keys he threw at me must have just been fake because he just drove away, leaving me stranded there stupidly. What makes everything worse is that it all happened so fast I couldn't even get the damn license plate. I still had my phone though, and the first thing I did was cancel the only card I had, because I couldn't risk him spending money I didn't have, and then I called the police. I walked back to Burger King and filed a report when they met me there, but with only the description of a rusty white truck and an average middle-aged white guy. Nothing ever came of it. He took the ad down, and his email wasn't even a real name. It was just named after a video game character, and again, I didn't get his plates. So all in all, I lost $4,000 of straight cash, had to wait for a new card in the mail, had to get a new license, and they didn't even catch the guy. The moral of the story is don't use Craigslist and don't be as stupid as I was. During my time in college, I shared a small house with a friend of mine I'll call Brian. He was my roommate for the first year, but after that we decided to leave the dorms and split the rent on a house because we both had good enough jobs. We had never rented a place before, so we didn't really know how to set up a budget. Several months later, everything was in order, but we didn't realize this place was consuming both of our bank accounts until almost a year had passed. Since neither of us wanted to leave, the obvious solutions were to either move out or find another roommate. So we began looking for a roommate. We started by contacting all of our other friends, but nobody was interested. So the only option was to post a notice online. Brian posted on Craigslist, and I posted on Facebook Marketplace. We had never done this before, and it felt strange, but we knew we didn't have many options. A few weeks passed with only a few responses, and none of them were seriously considering moving in, until Brian showed me an email he received from a man named Kevin in response to his Craigslist ad. The following day, the person who appeared legitimate came over to see the house. He was a few years older than us and had just graduated, but we were happy to have him because he seemed nice and looked clean and everything. He agreed to the rent split and moved in the following week. Kevin spent a lot of time with us in the months that followed, and we got to know him pretty well. But then, for some reason, he suddenly became very closed off. The guy and I hardly ever interacted, and when we did, he was silent. He would spend most of his time in his room with his door closed, only coming out to get food or go to work. I wasn't particularly bothered by it. It was just a little strange to me. Anyways, it was around month 4 with him being there that things started to take a turn for the worst. I had just gotten home from work when Brian quietly calls my name from the living room as I walked through the door. What's going on? He mentions that Kevin was home, so to not talk too loud. Then he tells me about a strong smell he noticed when passing his room today. I told him I hadn't noticed it. He points down the hall toward Kevin's room and tells me to quietly walk past and see if I notice. So I got up and made my way quietly down the hall towards Kevin's door. I didn't even have to get very close to smell what he was talking about. It was awful and disgusting. I had no idea what it was and had never smelled it in the house before. Brian suggested we ask him what it was, and I agreed. We both went to his door, trying not to breathe in too hard, and then knocked again and again, calling out to him that he didn't answer. Brian said he was sure that Kevin was in there, but after a couple more minutes we just gave up and figured we'd ask him tomorrow. It was already pretty late at this point, so we both made a quick dinner and then ate while watching TV in the living room, and then we both went to bed. The next day I caught Kevin on his way out of the house and asked him what the smell was last night. "Oh, I was just taking out the trash." He quickly left and drove off. That answer didn't make any sense to me, but I didn't want to press him too hard. I told Brian later that day, and he agreed that it was weird but didn't know what else to do, so we left it at that. Another couple weeks go by. Again, Kevin barely talked to us, but the smell had gone away by now. I got home from work late one night, and Brian and Kevin were both in the rooms already asleep probably, so I pretty much went straight up to my room and fell asleep as well. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up hearing some movement below my room, which was where Kevin's room was located downstairs. I listened for a couple minutes trying to figure out what he was doing, but eventually I fell back asleep. The next morning, Kevin ran out of the house to go to work as usual. However, he didn't return home that night. Another couple days would go by and he still hadn't come home. I called him multiple times and his phone instantly went to voicemail. We were starting to get worried and decided to check his room to see if there were any clues as to what was going on. His room was pretty messy and actually kind of looked like a lot of his stuff had been packed up and taken out. I also found a pair of glasses in his drawer with some other random belongings, which was weird because Kevin didn't wear glasses. He left some clothes and all of his furniture behind though, which made us believe that he didn't just move out suddenly. Brian ended up calling the police to notify them about Kevin possibly being missing, and an officer arrived that night to investigate and ask us questions. We told him everything we knew and let him look at his room. Brian also gave him a picture that we had taken together back when Kevin first moved in. After that, we didn't get an update until a week later. A different detective called us and informed us that the identity of the man in the photo with us was not Kevin. They said a family member recognized him as their missing son who had been gone for almost a year. After that, the case got a lot more complicated and we didn't have much helpful information because the guy pretty much lied about everything he told us. So after a little bit we lost contact and stopped getting updates. As far as we were told, the man was just some regular guy that was living with his parents who suddenly went missing for no known reason. He never came back to our house though, and I'm not sure if he was ever found. It's the most interesting and creepy experience I've had though. Just knowing that I was living in the Kevin house as someone who made up a completely fake identity and was legally missing gives me chills every time I think about it. It's pretty hard not to assume that this man was trying to hide from the police because of something he had done or was still doing. I was using Craigslist to sell some of my old, unused items that I had stashed away in my house. I was just trying to organize what I needed from what I didn't need before moving out in a few months when I discovered my old motor tools. They were of high quality and still worked, but I had recently replaced them with battery-powered ones. I snapped a few photos and listed them on Craigslist because I had no use for them any longer. Given that they weren't that old and were still fully functional, I had listed a power drill driver and matching tool set for $80. This was a truly excellent offer. Responses were received quickly. I received 2 responses to my post within an hour. One of them sent me an email to see if $50 would be acceptable. I politely declined though. The person who responded to the other one said they were very interested and wanted to purchase them that very evening for the price listed. I agreed and said I'd be available at 5 o'clock if he wanted to swing by and pick them up. When I'm selling something, I never let anyone inside my house. I used to simply take the items outside to my driveway and speak with them there. It was a busy street in the neighborhood, so I wasn't concerned about anyone attempting something in public. To complete the transaction as quickly as possible, I was going to stand in the driveway with the items a little before 5 as I usually did. However, there was a knock on the door just after 4:30. When I turned to look, I saw a man standing next to his red car, which was parked in the driveway. I asked who he was as I slightly opened the door. The man acknowledged that he was early and stated that he was here to purchase the tools listed on Craigslist. I advised him to wait in his car for a moment since I wasn't yet ready to receive him. He hesitated, which made the conversation awkwarder than it needed to be. He then turned around though. As soon as he left, I gathered my tools and went to meet him at the top of the driveway. He tested the tools with an outlet I had outside and seemed pleased with them. He said while holding the drill, "How about 20? The price was 80. 20 is too low, but I can go a little lower." I said nicely. However, he had already agreed to pay 80 for them, so I was a little irritated because $20 was such a complete ripoff. He set the drill down, then turned his back on me and walked back to his car before leaving. I felt duped and like I had wasted my time, which confused and upset me. I put the tools back inside and carried on with my night while trying not to let myself get too upset about it. Really, it was just a small inconvenience. At least, that's what I thought. Later, as I passed by the front windows, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I noticed the same red car. It was parked 3 houses down the street from mine. I took a close look to make sure it was the same man. However, nobody was inside. I had no way of knowing for sure because it was an empty parked car. I persuaded myself that it was merely a coincidence and continued. I continued to watch TV and help my night prepare food as another hour passed. But then someone knocked on my door. I felt a little uneasy, but I made the decision to ignore it and hold out hope that whoever it was would leave. Naturally, the man from earlier came to mind first. They knocked again after only 30 seconds. He shouted from the other side of the door, "Hey, it's me. I decided I'll take the tools. I brought the money." I didn't believe him at all. Everything came together in my head when I realized that the car I had seen an hour earlier was him, suggesting that he had been following me home all night. I remained silent and instead dialed the police, giving them the name of the man in the car he was driving. The man continued to call out, stating that he wanted to purchase the tools. But then it went quiet for a moment, and I was still standing by my couch, staring out the front door. Another minute passed, and I had no idea what to do. The cops were already on their way and would be here any minute. So I felt safe enough to be able to check out the windows. I quietly walked over to the window that was beside the door. But then suddenly, I heard something hit the side of the house with great force. The sound was followed by leaves rustling and footsteps running away. I looked out the window and saw the guy running with a limp down to his car. However, the cops arrived just in time, stopping him halfway. It surprised me to hear that the man admitted to a lot. He said he planned on robbing me, but I wouldn't let him into the house, which complicated things for him. Additionally, he tried climbing the tree on the side of my house and jumping onto the roof, but he missed, hitting the side and falling on his leg. The thing is, though, he was armed with a knife, and the roof he tried to jump on was just under my second-story window, which after checking was unlocked. So if he had made the jump, he actually would have gotten inside. He claimed it was just an attempted robbery, but claims are just that. I stopped using Craigslist, and even to this day, I lock every single window in my house, even the ones that I think are unreachable.